In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears.
Okay, I believe it's Friday. Sure feels like a Friday. Last night was Thursday, and I did American folklore, so yeah, I guess today is Friday. I hope everyone has had a good week so far, because it's almost over. And then you can relax and recharge for next week. I do have it on my schedule this week that I will probably be missing next week. Let me make sure of my calendar because I don't remember dates all that well. Okay. Yeah, I will be gone from the 18th to the 27th. I think I put my schedule saying that. My schedule. Okay. So next week. Okay. On the actual schedule page for next week, I might stream some Baldur's Gates, but Tuesday through next Thursday, I'm going to be out of town, hopefully enjoying some nice, cool weather in Colorado. Hopefully. No promises, but that's where I'm going to be. I may actually do some live stream from up there. Probably just me sitting at a stream and listening to water rush by, provided they've had rain, because they've been almost as dry as Texas lately, but They've been having storms this week, so. Ugh. But also, I'm going to take apart my computer and clean it again because, well, it do get dusty in this town. But I can't think of anything else to do for an introduction, so let's skip over to the library. I do have 3 potion-looking beverages. One is kind of bluish green, the other is orange, and the other is dark red. So. It's always strange when I'm lurking on the stream and I'm hearing like sound effects. But yeah. So we're over halfway through this book. We've got some pretty cool stories so far. The next one, admittedly, is a bit of a Christmas story. And it's... I'm not sure if you consider it a sad story or not. I do think it's a little sad, but... Okay, random sound of game. What our first story for Hans Andersen's fairy tales this week. The Fir Tree. Far away in the deep forest, there once grew a pretty little fir tree. His position was delightful. The sun shone full upon him, the breeze played freely around him, and in the neighborhood grew many companion fir trees, some older, some younger. But the little fir tree was not happy. He was always longing to be tall. He did not care for the sun or the wind, or for the merry, pleasant children who came around the forest to gather strawberries and raspberries. Indeed, sometimes they would sit with a pitcher full of gathered fruit underneath the little fir tree and say, "What a pretty little tree this is!" And then the fir tree would feel very much vexed. Year by year he grew. Every year he sent forth a long green shoot, for you could always tell how many years a fir tree lived by counting the number of joints in its stem. Yes, Salty? Can grab some first? Pretty good. I just mentioned that I'm going to be out of town for most of next week, so I won't have any streams unless I do a live stream from the stream using my phone. Because I think I'm staying in a nice cabin that's right up against the stream, so if there's water, you'll get to see it. But I do hope that you've had a good week. It's definitely time for some nice relaxing stories. I hope so too. At least it'll be hopefully cooler than 105 like it's been here this past month. Would you like me to start the story over or continue where I had it? Okay. Oh, that were as tall as the others, sighed the little tree. Then I could spread out my branches so far, and my crown to look out over the wide world around. The birds would build their nests among my branches, and when the wind blew, I should bend my head as graciously as the large pines. He took no pleasure in the sunshine, in the song of the birds, nor in the little red clouds that sailed above him every morning and evening. In the winter time, when the ground was covered with white glistening snow, a hare would come scampering about now and then, and would jump right over the little tree's head, and that annoyed him terribly. However, 2 winters passed, and by the third the tree was so tall that the hare had to run around it. Oh, to grow, to grow, to become tall and old, that is the only thing in the world worth living for, thought the tree. In the autumn, the woodcutters came and felled some of the largest trees. This happened every year, and the young fir, who was by this time of reasonable height, shuddered when he thought of those grand, magnificent trees fall with tremendous crashing and groaning on the ground. Their boughs were then cut off, their stems looked terribly lanky and long, and naked as they lay on the earth. They could hardly be recognized. They were placed upon each other in a wagon, and horses drew them away, far, far away from the forest. Next spring, when the swallows and the storks had returned from abroad, the little fir tree asked them, "Do you know where the large trunks are taken? Have you met any of them?" The swallows knew nothing about the matter, but the stork looked thoughtful for a moment, and then nodded his head and said, "Yes, I believe I've seen them. As I was flying from Egypt to the place, I met several ships. Those ships had splendid masts, and I have little doubt that they were the trees from this forest. They smelled like firwood. I can give you their regards. They sailed gloriously, quite gloriously." "Oh, that I were too tall to sail upon the tree!" exclaimed the little fir tree. "Tell me what it is, this sea, and what it looks like." "That would take too long to explain," said the stork, and away he strutted. "Be happy, I am," said the sunbeams. "Rejoice in your radiant youth and the freshness of life that is within you." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew wept tears over it. But the little fir tree did not understand why they were trying to tell him. When Christmas approached, many young trees were felled. Some of them were not even so tall, and certainly no taller than the young restless fir tree, who was always longing to be away. These young trees were chosen from the most beautiful. Their branches were not cut off. They were put upon a truck, and horses pulled them away, far, far away from the forest. "Where are they going?" asked the fir tree. "They are not larger than I am. Indeed, one of them was much smaller. Why did they keep all their branches? Where are they taken?" We know," twittered the sparrows. "We peeped through the windows in the town below. We know where they have gone. They receive the utmost honor and glory. They're placed in the middle of the room and decked out with beautiful things: gilded apples, sweetmeats, playthings, stars, ribbons, and hundreds of bright candles." "And then?" asked the little fir tree, trembling in every branch. "What happens then?" "We saw no more," said the sparrows. "But this was beautiful." "Will I be destined for such a glorious fate?" wondered the little fir tree. "This is far better than sailing over the sea. How I long for the time! Oh, that Christmas were near! I'm now tall and full of branches like the others that were carried away last year. Oh, if only I were already on the truck, or back still in a warm room, honored and adorned. And then, yes, something still better will happen then. Else why would they take the trouble to decorate me? Something still greater, still more splendid must happen. But what?" Oh, I suffer. I could die with longing. I don't know what is the matter with me. Rejoice in our love, said the fresh air and the glorious sunshine. Be happy with your youth and freedom. But the fir tree would not rejoice. He grew and grew, in winter and in summer. He stood there clothed in his dark green foliage, and the people that saw him said, "That is a beautiful tree." Christmas came, and he was the first that was felled. The axe struck sharply through the wood, and the tree sank to the ground with a heavy groan. He suffered an agony, a faintness that he has never experienced. He quite forgot to think of his good fortune, for he felt sorrow at being compelled to leave his home and the place where he was sprung. He knew that he would never see those dear old comrades again, the little bushes and flowers that had flourished under his shadow, perhaps not even the birds. Neither did he think the journey pleasant. He found his wits again when, in the yard to which he was first taken with the other trees, he heard a man say, "Oh, this is a splendid one, the very thing we want." Two smartly dressed servants arrived and carried the fir tree into a large, beautiful hall. Pictures hung on the walls, and on the mantelpiece stood large Chinese vases with lions painted on them. There were rocking chairs, divans covered in silk, tables covered with toys that had cost hundreds of shillings. At least, that is what the children said. The fir tree was put into a cask filled with sand, but no one would know that it was a cask, for it hung with green cloth and placed upon a gaily colored carpet. The tree trembled. What was to happen next? A lady servant, assisted by no, a young lady, assisted by the servants, now began to adorn him. Upon some branches they hung nets cut out of colored paper, and every net was filled with sweets. From the others, gilded apples and walnuts were suspended, looking as if they had grown there. More than 100 little wax tapers, red, blue, and white, were placed among the boughs. Small dolls that looked almost like human beings, and the tree had never seen such things before, seemed to be dancing to and fro among the leaves, and high up on the top a large star, gold tinsel, was fastened. Tonight, they thought, tonight it will light it up, and everybody was happy. Would that it were evening, thought the tree. Would that the candles were lit, and then, what will happen then? Will the trees come out of the forest to see me? Will the sparrows fly here and look through the window panes? Shall I be standing here adorned both winter and summer? In the evening, the candles were lit. What a blaze and splendor there was! The tree trembled in all his branches, so that one little taper turned over instead of twilight. "Oh dear!" cried the people, and the fire was extinguished in great haste. So the tree dared not tremble again. He was afraid of losing something of splendor, and he was quite bewildered with all his glory and brightness. All of a sudden, both folding doors were flung open, and a troop of children rushed in. The little ones stood quite silent, but only for a moment, and then they shouted until the walls resounded. They danced round the tree exultantly, and picked one present after another from its branches. "What are they doing?" thought the tree. "What will happen now?" And the candles burned down to the branches, and they were extinguished, and the children were given leave to plunder the tree. They rushed at him with such violence that the boughs all crackled. He had not been fastened to the ceiling, he would have been overturned. The children danced and played about with their beautiful toys. No one looked at the tree any more, except the old nanny, who came and peeping among the boughs to see if there was a fig or an apple that might have been left behind. "A story! A story!" begged the children, pulling the short, fat man to the tree. And he sat down, saying, "It is pleasant to sit under the green boughs. Moreover, the tree may benefit by hearing my story. But I shall tell you only one. Would you like to hear the one about Jack and Jill, or the one about Humpty Dumpty, who fell off the wall, and yet got the throne and won the princess? Jack and Jill! Shouted some. Humpty Dumpty! Exclaimed the others. There was quite an uproar, and the fir tree alone was silent, thinking, won't I have anything to do with it? But his part was over. And the short, fat man told the story of Humpty Dumpty, who fell off the wall, and yet got to the throne and won the princess. The children clapped their hands and called out for another story. They wanted to hear the story of Jack and Jill, but they did not get it. Meanwhile, the fir tree stood silent and thoughtful. The birds in the forest had never told him anything like this. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and yet won the princess? Yes, strange things come to pass in the world, and the fir tree believed it must all be true because such a pleasant man had told the children of it. Well, who knows? I, too, may fall off the wall and win a princess. And he was happy with the expectation that the next day he would again be decked out with candles and playthings, with golden fruit. Tomorrow I shall not tremble, he thought. I shall rejoice in my magnificence and splendor. Tomorrow I shall again hear the story of Humpty Dumpty, and perhaps even of that Jack and Jill. And the tree mused upon these things all night. In the morning the maid and the manservant came. Now it will be all over again, thought the tree. But they dragged him out of the room, up the stairs, and into an attic chamber where they thrust him into a dark corner where not a ray of light penetrates. What can be the meaning of this? The fir tree wondered. What am I to do here? What shall I hear in this place? And he leant against the wall and thought, and plenty of time he had for thinking it over, for the day after day and night after night passed, yet no one ever came into the room. In the end, somebody did come in, but it was only to push small boxes in the corner. The tree had now entirely hidden it from sight and seemed to be completely forgotten. Congrats on the 10-room streak. It is winter now, thought the tree. The ground is frozen hard and covered with snow. They cannot plant me now, so I am to stay here in shelter till spring comes. Men are so clever and prudent. I only wish it were not so dark and so dreadfully lonely. There is not even a little hare. How pleasant it was in the forest when the snow lay on the ground and the hare scampered about. Even when he jumped over my head, although I did not like it then. But up here, it is so very lonely. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse who was scurrying along. Another followed him. They sniffed about the fir tree and slipped in among the branches. It's horribly cold, said the little mice. Otherwise, it's very comfortable in here. Don't you agree, you old fir tree? I'm not at all old, said the fir tree. There are many who are much older than I am. How did you get to be here? Asked the mice. And what do you know about the world? They were most uncommonly inquisitive. Tell us about where the delightful place on earth. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been to the larder where cheese lies on the shelves? Where the cured bacon hangs from the ceiling? Where one can dance over tallow candles? Where you can go in thin and come out fat? I know nothing of that place, said the fir tree. But I know the forest where the sun shines and the birds sing. And he spoke to them about his youth and his pleasures. Never had the little mice heard anything like it before. They listened most attentively and exclaimed, To be sure! How much you have seen! How very happy you must have been! Happy? Asked the fir tree in surprise, and he thought the moment and everything he had told them. Yes, on the whole, those were very pleasant days. And then he told them about that Christmas Eve when he had been decked out with candles and sweetmeats. Oh, cried the little mice, how happy you've been! How wonderful times you've had, you old fir tree! I told you before, I'm not all that old, said the fir tree. 'Tis only this winter that I've left the forest. I'm just in the prime of my life. True, I'm very tall for my age. What beautiful stories you can tell, said the little mice. And the next night they came again and brought with them 4 other little mice who wanted to hear the tree's history. And the more the tree spoke of his youth in the forest, the more vividly he remembered it. But and thought, yes, those were pleasant times, but they may come again one day. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and nevertheless won the princess. Perhaps I too will win a princess. Then the fir tree thought about a pretty little delicate birch he had seen in the forest. She would have made a very lovely princess for a fir tree. Who is Humpty Dumpty? Asked the little mice. Whereupon the fir tree told them the whole story. He could not remember every word of it perfectly, and the little mice enjoyed it so much they jumped nearly as high as the top of the tree for joy. The next night several more mice came, and on Sunday there were even 2 rats. However, they said that the story was not at all amusing, and that annoyed the little mice. Do you know only that one story? Asked the rats. Yes, only that one, answered the tree. I heard it on the happiest day of my life, though I did not know then how happy I was. It is a miserable story. Don't you know one dealing with pork and tallow, some larder story? Sorry, said the tree. Well, then, we've heard enough, said the rats, and returned home to their families. The little mice didn't come again either. The tree sighed. It was so pleasant when they were sitting around me, those little mice listened to what I said. Now that, too, is all past. However, I shall have pleasure in remembering it when I am taken away from this place. But when would that be? One morning people came and rummaged in the lumber room. The boxes were pushed aside and the tree dragged out of his corner. They threw him carelessly on the floor, but one of the servants picked him up and carried him downstairs. Once more he beheld the light of day. Now life is beginning again, thought the tree. He felt the fresh air, the first warm rays of the sun. He was outside in the yard. Everything happened so quickly that he quite forgot to look at himself. There was so much to see all around. The yard adjoined a garden, which everything was fresh and blooming. The roses clustered brightly and fragrantly around the trellis, the lime trees were in full bloom, and the swallows were flying to and fro, twittering, Victory! My beloved has come! But it was not the fir tree that they meant by that. I shall live, exulted the tree, and spread its branches. But they were all dried up and yellow. It was thrown down upon the heap of weeds and nettles. Only the star of gold tinsel that had been left on his crown sparkled in the bright sunlight. Playing on the yard were some merry children who at Christmas time had danced around the tree. One of the younger ones saw the golden star and tore it off the tree. Look, it is still fastened to the ugly old Christmas tree, he shouted, and trampled on the branches until they broke under his boots. And the tree looked at all of the flowers now blooming in the freshness of their beauty. He looked at himself, and he wished from his heart he had been left to wither in the dark corner of the lumber room. He called to mind his happy life in the forest, his triumph on the merry Christmas Eve, but he also recalled the sweet little mice who had listened so eagerly when he told them the story of Humpty Dumpty. Past, all past, said the poor tree. If only I'd been happy when I had a very reason to be so. The manservant came and broke the tree into small pieces, heaping them up and setting fire to them. The tree groaned deeply, and every groan sounded like a little shot. The children all ran up to the fire and jumped about in place of the blaze, looking at it and shouting, Piff, paff! But at each of those heavy groans, the fir tree thought of a bright summer's day, or a starry winter's night in the forest, or of that splendid Christmas Eve, and of Humpty Dumpty, the only story that he'd ever heard and could retell. And at last the fir tree was burnt. The children played about in the yard. On the chest of the youngest sparkled the golden star that the tree had worn on the happiest evening of his life. But that was all past. And the fir tree was past, and Christmas Eve was past, and the life of the beautiful forest was past, and even in the attic and the little mice were past. And the story, too, is past. For stories come to an end, sometime or another. It's kind of a sad story. The next story for the night: The Nightingale. In China, where the Chinese live, even the emperor is Chinese, as you may well know. Now, what I'm about to tell you happened many years ago. Well, for this very reason, it is more important to tell you that you should hear the story before it is forgotten. The emperor's palace was the most magnificent mansion in the world. It was made entirely of fine porcelain, but so very costly and fragile that it was dangerous to even touch it. The choicest flowers were to be seen in the garden, and to the most gorgeous of all, the little silver bells were fastened, so that the tinkling might prevent anyone from passing by without noticing them. Everything in the emperor's garden was most cleverly arranged, and it extended so far that even the gardener did not know where it ended. Whoever walked beyond it, however, came to a beautiful wood with very high trees and deep lakes, and that wood extended as far as a wide blue ocean. Large vessels could sail close enough under the branches, and among the branches dwelt a nightingale, who sang so sweetly that even the poor fishermen, who had so much else to do, would stand still and listen to her song. How beautifully the bird sings, they would say. But then he had to attend to his work and forget the bird. Yet the following night, if the nightingale sang again and the fisherman heard it again, he would exclaim, "How beautiful!" Travelers came from all parts of the world to the emperor's city. They admired the city, the palace, and the garden, but when they heard the nightingale, they said, "This is best of all." And they talked about it after they got home. Learned men wrote books about the city, the palace, the gardens, but they never omitted mention the nightingale. And poets wrote the most beautiful verses about the nightingale in the woods and the sea. These books were translated into every language of the world, and one of them fell into the hands of the Emperor of China. He was sitting in his golden chair, and he read and nodded his head, for the splendid descriptions of the city, the palace, the garden pleased him greatly. "But there's nothing like the nightingale," was written in the book. "What is this?" said the Emperor. "The nightingale? I've never heard of it. Can there be such a bird in my empire, even in my garden, without my knowing? And I have to learn it from books?" He called his chamberlain. Now he was so great a person that no one of inferior rank presumed to speak to him. If anyone dared to do so, he would only say "pish," which has no particular meaning. "They say there's a remarkable bird here called the nightingale," said the Emperor. "Her song, they think, is worth more than anything else in my dominion. Why has nobody told me?" "I have never heard any mention of her," said the chamberlain. "She has never been presented at court." "I wish you to come and sing before me this evening," said the Emperor. "The whole world seems to know what I have, and I do not know it myself." "I have never heard any mention of her," repeated the chamberlain, "but I shall find her." But where is she to be found? The chamberlain ran up one flight of stairs and down another, through halls, through passages. No one he met ever heard so much of the nightingale. So the Chamberlain returned to the Emperor and said that the Nightingale was a figment of the book writer's imagination. Your Imperial Majesty must not believe all that is written in books. Much of them is pure invention, belongs to the realm of black magic. But the book in which I have read it, returned the Emperor, has been sent to me by the High and Mighty Emperor of Japan, and therefore it cannot be true. I wish to hear the Nightingale. She must be here this evening. If not, the whole court will be flogged after supper. Thanks, said the Chamberlain, and ran against the stairs and down, through the hallways and through the passages. Half the courtiers ran with him, for no one who would have relinquished a flogging after supper. They all asked about the wonderful Nightingale, whom the whole world talked of, and whom nobody at the court knew. At last they asked a poor little girl in the scullery, who said, "Oh, the Nightingale. Yes, I know her very well. Oh, she can sing. Every evening I carry the leftovers to my sick mother who lives by the shore. When I walk back and stay to rest a little in the wood, I hear the Nightingale sing. It is so beautiful and makes the tears rush into my eyes. It is just as if my mother were kissing me." "Little scullery maid," said the Chamberlain, "I shall get you a reserved appointment in the kitchen, together with permission to see His Majesty the Emperor dine, and if you conduct us to the Nightingale who is commanded to sing at the court this evening." So they went to the wood where the Nightingale used to sing. Nearly half the court went them, and while they were on their way, a cow began to low. "That's her," said one of the court pages. "Now we've got her. It is certainly the extraordinary voice of so small an animal, but you've heard her somewhere before." "No, those are cows you hear lowing," said the scullery maid. "We are still far from the place." The frogs were now croaking in the pond. "Oh, that's wonderful," said the famous court preacher. "Now I hear her. It sounds just like small church bells." "No, those are frogs," said the little scullery maid. "But now I think we shall hear her soon." Then the Nightingale began to sing. "That's her," said the little scullery maid. "Listen, she is sitting up there." And she pointed to the little gray bird up in the branches of the tree. "Can it be possible?" said the Chamberlain. "I should never have thought so. How plain she looks! She seems to have lost her color at the sight of so many distinguished people." "Little Nightingale," called the scullery maid, "our gracious Emperor wishes you to sing to him some." "With greatest delight," said the Nightingale, and she sang quite delightfully. "It sounds like glass bells," said the Chamberlain. "And look at her little throat, how it moves. It is surprising that we should never have heard of her before. She will be a great success at the court." "Shall I sing again to the Emperor?" asked the Nightingale, because she thought the Emperor was among the audience. "Most excellent Nightingale," said the Chamberlain, "I have a great honor to invite you to a court festival, which is to be taking place this evening, when His Royal Majesty will doubtless be enchanted by your delightful song." "My song would sound far better among the green trees," said the Nightingale. However, she followed them willingly when she heard the Emperor wished it. There was a general cleaning and polishing of the imperial palace. The walls and the floors, which were all porcelain, glittered with 1,000 gold lamps. The loveliest flowers with the merriest tinkling bells were placed all around the passages, people running to and fro excitedly, which caused all the bells to ring, and there was such a din that nobody could hear themselves speak. In the middle of the grand hall where the Emperor had his throne, a gold perch was erected on which the Nightingale was to sit. The whole court was present, and the little scullery maid, who had now been given the rank of the imperial court cook, received permission to stand behind the big folding door leading into the hall. Everybody wore his best clothes, and all eyes were fixed upon the little gray bird, to whom the Emperor now nodded benignly as to signal her to begin. The Nightingale sang so sweetly that tears came to the Emperor's eyes and rolled down his cheeks. And now the nightingale sang sweetly still, and that touched the hearts of all who heard her. The emperor wanted to present her with a golden slipper which she was to wear around her neck at all times, but she thanked him and she said that she was already sufficiently rewarded. "This is the most amiable way to win hearts," said the ladies present, and they all put water into their mouths and began to move their throats, as the nightingale did, whenever somebody spoke to them. That way they thought they would become nightingales too. Even the footmen and chambermaids declared that they were satisfied, and that meant a lot because they were always the most difficult to please. Yes, indeed, the nightingale's success was complete. She was now to remain at court and have her own cage and permission to fly out twice a day and once a night. 12 attendants were to accompany her on her excursions, and they held her with a silken band that fastened around her foot, and they kept good hold. There was no pleasure in such excursions. All the city was talking of the wonderful bird, and when two people met one night, they would say night, and the other would say gale, and they sighed and understood each other. 11 newborn babies were named Nightingale, but so far all they could do was cry. One day a large parcel arrived for the emperor at the palace, on which was written Nightingale. "We have another new book about our famous bird," said the emperor. However, it was not a book. It was a small piece of machinery, carefully packed in a box. An artificial nightingale, which was intended to look like a living one. The plaything did not look gray and modest like its model, but was covered all with diamonds and rubies and sapphires. When the artificial bird had been wound up, it could sing one of the tunes that the real nightingale sang, and its tail, glittering all with silver and gold, went up and down all the time. A little band was fastened around its neck, on which was written, "The nightingale of the Emperor of China is poor compared to the nightingale of the Emperor of China." Is that right? "The nightingale of the Emperor of Japan is poor compared to the nightingale of the Emperor of China." How delightful, exclaimed everybody, and the bear was immediately given the title of Chief Imperial Nightingale Winner. "Now they will sing together," they said. "What a beautiful duet it will make." And so they had to sing together. But it was not a success, for the real nightingale sang in her own natural way, whereas the artificial produced its tones mechanically. The master of the emperor's music took the side of the artificial bird and said, "It is not his fault. He keeps exact time, quite in accordance with the method I teach." So the artificial bird sang alone. He was just as successful as a real nightingale, and in addition, he was much prettier to look at. 33 times he sang the same tune, and yet he was not weary. People wanted to listen to him again, but the emperor thought it was now time for the real nightingale sang once more. But where had she gone to? Nobody had noticed that she had flown out the open window and back to her own green wood. "What is the meaning of this?" said the emperor angrily, and all the courtiers called the nightingale an ungrateful creature. "Anyway, we have a better bird," they consoled themselves, and the artificial bird had to sing his song for the 34th time. The audience had still not learned because it was difficult. The music master praised the bird inordinately and declared that he was superior to the real nightingale, not only in his exterior experience, but also in his voice. "You see, your majesty, and my noble lords," he said, "with the real nightingale, one never knows what is coming, but everything is settled with the artificial bird. It can be taken to pieces, and the works can be examined, how the wheels fit into each other, and how the sound is produced." "That is perfectly true," everyone agreed, and the music master received permission to show the bird to the people the next Sunday. "They should also hear him sing," commanded the emperor. And so it happened, and they were pleased as if they had gotten drunk on tea, for it is tea that makes China merry. They all said, "Ooh," and raised their forefingers and nodded their heads. But the fisherman who had heard the real nightingale said, "It does not It does sound quite pretty, almost like a real bird, but yet there's something missing. Heaven knows that. Real Nightingale, however, was exiled for disobedience. The artificial bird had his place in a silken cushion next to the emperor's bed. All the presents he had received, gold and precious stones, lay around him. He had obtained the rank and title of High Imperial Nightingale Singer, and was allotted #1 seat at the left side. For the emperor thought the left-handed side was noblest, because one's heart is on the left-hand side, even the emperor's heart. The music master wrote 25 volumes about the artificial bird using the longest and most difficult words obtained in the Chinese language, and it was much too Chinese for even the Chinese, but they all said they read it, otherwise they would have been considered stupid. Thus it went for a whole year. The emperor and the court and the whole Chinese people knew every note of the artificial bird's song by heart. That was the very reason they liked him so much. They could now sing with him. The street urchins sang cluck, 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 and even the emperor sang the song. Yes, it was charming. One evening, when the bird was in full song, with the emperor lying in his bed listening, there was a sudden bang, then a sir, and all the wheels were running about, and the music stopped. The emperor jumped out of bed and called his chief physician, but what use would that be? When the best clockmaker was fetched, and at last, after much trial and error, the bird was in some measure put to rights again. But the clockmaker said that he must be spared singing, for the pegs had almost worn out, and could not be renewed in such a way that the music would still be correct. There was great lamentation. Once a year only, therefore, the artificial bird was allowed to sing, and even then there were difficulties. The music master made a speech full of his favorite long words, and the singing was good as ever. When 5 years passed, a great affliction visited the land, for the people had heard that the emperor was ill and could not live very much longer. They thought highly of him in their hearts, so though they had already elected a new emperor. But they stood in the street outside the palace and asked the chamberlain how the emperor was. Pish, he said, and shook his head. Cold and pale, the emperor lay in his magnificent bed. All the court believed him to be already dead, and everyone had fastened away to greet the new emperor. The footmen were standing in the quarters, gossiping about the new emperor, and the maids were having a grand tea party. The floors in all rooms and passages had been covered with thick cloth in order that no step should be heard, and all over the palace silence and stillness reigned. But the emperor was not dead yet. Stiff and pale he lay in his splendid bed with long velvet curtains and heavy gold tassels. The window was slightly open, and the moon shone down on him and the artificial bird. The poor emperor could hardly breathe. He felt as though something were sitting on his chest. He opened his eyes and saw that it was Death, who had put on the emperor's crown and was holding the golden scimitar in his one hand and the splendid imperial banner in the other. From under the folds of thick velvet hangings, strangest-looking heads were seen peering forth, some with an absolutely hideous expression, others with an extremely gentle and lovely aspect. They were the good and bad deeds the emperor had done, which were now fixing their eyes upon him, while death was sitting in his heart. Do you remember this? They whispered one after another. Do you recollect that? And they were telling him so much of the sweat broke out on his forehead. I cannot stand, he said. Music, music. Beat the great Chinese drum to drown out the sound. But the voices went on, and Death nodded his head in Chinese fashion to everything they said. Music, music, cried the emperor. You dear little artificial bird, sing, oh, do sing. I've given you gold and precious stones. I've even hung my gold slipper around your neck. Sing, do please sing. But the bird was silent. There was no one who could wind him up, and he could not sing of his own accord. Death continued to stare at the Emperor with his great hollow eyes, everywhere still, fearfully still. All at once, the sweetest song was heard from the window. It was a little living nightingale who was sitting on a branch outside. She had heard of her emperor's severe illness and had come to comfort him with her song and to give him new hope. As she sang, the spectral forms became paler and paler. The blood flowed more and more quickly through the emperor's feeble limbs, and even Death listened and said, "Go on, little nightingale." "Yes, you give me the splendid gold scimitar and the gay banner and the emperor's crown," answered the nightingale. And Death gave her all the treasures, each for a song. And the nightingale sang on. She sang of the quiet churchyard where white rose blossoms, and the lilac sends forth its fragrance, and the fresh grass is bedewed with the tears of sorrow from friends of the departed. Then Death seized with a longing for his garden, and flew out of the window like a cold white shadow. Thank you, you heavenly bird," said Emperor. "I've recognized you. I've banished you from my realm, and yet you have returned and sent away those evil faces from my bed and death from my heart. How can I reward you?" "You have rewarded me," said the nightingale. "I saw tears in your eyes when I sang to you for the first time. Those I shall never forget. They're like jewels to a singer's heart. But sleep now and wake freshly and healthy. I will sing you to sleep." And the nightingale sang. The emperor fell into a deep slumber. When he awoke, strong and healthy, the sun was shining at the window. Not one of his servants had returned, for they all believed him dead. Only the nightingale was still sitting there and singing. "You must always stay with me," said the emperor. "You need only sing when you wish, and I will break the artificial bird into 1,000 pieces." "Don't do that," said the nightingale. "He has done his best for you as long as he could. Keep him and take care of him. I cannot stay and build my nest at your palace, for I need my freedom and the green word. But I shall come when I like. I shall sit on the branch close to this window in the evening, and will sing to you to make you joyful and pensive. I shall sing to you for the happy people and the sorrowful ones. The good and the bad world which is concealed from you I will reveal to you, for I get around the country. I fly to the fisherman's hut, to the peasant's cottage, to all who are far distant from you and your court. I know your heart and you love it better than your crown. I will come and I will sing, but you must promise me one single thing." "Anything," said the bird. "Anything you like." Now he stood in his imperial splendor, which he had put on himself, and held the scimitar to his heart. The sword was heavy with gold. "Only thing I ask you," said the nightingale, "that no one know that you have a little bird who tells you everything. Let them all think you are wise." And with that, the nightingale flew away. Quietly, the attendants came in to look at their dead emperor, and lo, he stood there. "Good morning," he said. So, the little bird told him, huh? We're going to hit ads here for a second. So we will hit ads, and I will see you all back here in a few minutes. Okay. I think we're back. Timer's gone, so I hope we're back. So, why Hans Christian Andersen writes sad stories? I have yet to figure out. I mean, Little Mermaid has a sad happy ending. Tin Woodsman, no, not Tin Soldier has a sad happy ending. Thumbelina is probably the only one that has an actual happy ending. But it's sad during the middle of it. Hansel and Gretel was, well, we didn't do Hansel and Gretel. The Snow Queen, which, has very little to do with the Snow Queen. It has several happy stories in it. And the ending is rather lackluster. But that's just something I can't let it go. So our next story for this fabulous Friday. Sorry. For this fabulous Friday Night Fairy Tales, The Butterfly. The butterfly wanted to get married. Of course, he wanted to make a sweet little flower as his bride. Now he looked around and saw that every flower was sitting quietly and modestly on a stalk, as benefits a beautiful girl who was not yet engaged to be married. But there were so many to choose from, and it all seemed too much trouble for a butterfly, so he flew to the daisy. The French call her Margaret, and they know that she can foretell the future, as indeed she can. When people in love pull the petals out one by one, each time asking, the year, next year, sometime, never. Everyone asks in his or her own language. The butterfly, too, went to the daisy to ask her questions. He did not, however, pluck out all the white petals, but instead pressed a kiss on each one of them, because he thought it would be to his advantage to behave lovingly. Dear Miss Daisy, he said, you are the loveliest of all the flowers. You can foretell the future. Do tell me, who will be my bride? If I could know that, I would straight fly up to her and propose marriage. However, the daisy did not reply. She was annoyed that he had called her Mrs., for she was a girl like all the other flowers. That means that she's not a Mrs. The butterfly asked the daisy a second time, and a third time, as well, but when he never received a single word in answer, he became angry and flew off to try to find a bride for himself. It was spring, and there was an abundance of narcissus. Those are quite nice, said the butterfly. They look like girls about to be confirmed in their snowy white dresses, but they seem a bit disinteresting to me. Then he flew to the anemones, but he thought they were a little bitter. The violets were too passionately devoted, and the tulips too gorgeous. The daffodils too bourgeois, and the lime tree blossoms too small, and they also had too many relatives. The apple blossoms, well, yes, they did look somewhat like roses, but they were here today and gone tomorrow with the wind, and he thought marriage with one of them would be too short of a duration. He liked the sweet pea best. She was white and red, dainty and delicate, as becomes a good-looking daughter of the house who can cook into the bargain. Just when he was about to propose to her formally, he saw close to her a shoot with a withered blossom at the top. Who is that? He asked. That is my sister, said the sweet pea. Is that what you will look like later? Said the ladybug. and fled in horror. The honeysuckle was hanging near the fence, and there were many of these young ladies with their long faces and their yellow skin. He did not like them at all, but who did he like? Spring passed, then summer, and then autumn came and went. The butterfly had not yet made up his mind. The flowers dressed in the most gorgeous clothes, but it was all to no avail. They lacked the fresh dew of youth. When the heart itself is no longer young, fragrance is what it desires, and this cannot be found in dahlias or red poppies. So in the end, the butterfly turned to the mint. She has not got a special blossom, he thought, but she seems to be blossoms all over, because she sends forth an aroma from her roots to her top. There is fragrance in every single leaf of her. I shall marry that one. And he proposed to her. But the mint remained standing very stiffly erect, and listened to him quietly, and at last said, "Friendship, yes, but nothing else. I am old and you are old, and we can be good comrades, but get married? No, we should be fools at our age. People would laugh at us." And so the butterfly did not find a wife at all. He had been too particular, and no one should ever be that. Now he was destined to remain a crusty old bachelor. Late autumn drew near, and the sky was overcast, and there was rain, and there were cold winds which blew frostily over the backs of the old willow trees and made them rustle. You could not fly out any more in your summer clothes. Now the butterfly no longer flew out at all. He had happened to find a roof over his head, and there was a fire in the hearth which made him feel warm as though he were still in summer. He could go on living, but he said to himself, "Just living is not enough. One ought to have sunshine, freedom, and a little flower." He tumbled against the window pane, and people saw him and admired him, and pushed a pin through him and placed him in a glass box. That was all they could do for him. "Now I'm sitting in a stalk like the flowers," thought the butterfly. "That is not particularly pleasant. Possibly the same as being married. One gets stuck." And that consoled him. "That is no consolation whatsoever," said the potted plants of the worm. "You've probably not been able to make up your mind this time." "But one cannot rely completely on pot plants," thought the butterfly. "They have too many social relations with human beings." Yeah. So again, not a happy ending. Oh well. Our next story for tonight: The Red Shoes. Once upon a time there was a little girl, very pretty and delicate, but so poor that in the summertime she had to walk barefoot, and in winter she had to wear large, hard wooden clogs, so that her little feet grew quite red and sore. In the village there lived the shoemaker's old mother, and she sat down one day and made a pair of little shoes out of some old pieces of red cloth. They were clumsy enough, but they fitted the little girl fairly well, and she gave them to her. The little girl's name was Karen. It was the day of her mother's funeral when the red shoes were given to Karen. They were not at all suitable for mourning, but she had no others, and in them she walked with bare legs behind the miserable hearse. Just then a large stately carriage rolled by, and in a grand old lady. She looked at the little girl and pitied her, and so she said to the parson, "Let me have the little girl. I shall take care of her." Karen thought it was for the red of the red. Karen thought it was for the sake of the red shoes that the old lady had taken a fancy to her, but the old lady said they were frightful and had them burnt. Karen herself was dressed cleanly and neatly, and was taught to read and to sew, and people told her she was pretty. The mayor, however, whispered to her, "You are more than pretty. You are beautiful." It happened one day that the queen traveled to the part of the country with her little daughter, who was a princess. All the people, Karen amongst them, crowded in front of the palace. Dressed in white, the little princess stood at the window for everyone to see her. She wore neither train nor golden crown, but on her feet were pretty little Morocco leather shoes that were red, and much prettier than the ones the shoemaker's mother had once made for little Karen. Nothing in the world can be compared to those red shoes. Karen was now old enough to be confirmed, and she has had both a new frock and new shoes. The best shoemaker in town measured her little foot, and he did it in his own shop where large glass cases full of neat shoes and shining boots were fixed around the room. Everything looked marvelous, but unfortunately the old lady's sight was not too good. Amongst the shoes was a pair of red shoes that were worn like the princess's. Oh, how beautiful they were! The shoemaker said they had been made for Count's daughter, but had not quite fitted her.
Are they made with patent leather? Asked the old brother. See how they shine. Yes, they shine beautifully, exclaimed Karen.
And as the shoes fitted her, they were bought. But the old lady did not know they were red, for she was never allowed Karen to give her information of red shoes. But that is what Karen did. Everybody looked at her feet, and as she walked up to the nave and the walked up to the nave to the chancel, it seemed to her that if even the sculptured figures on the monuments, with their stiff ruffs and the long black robes, were fixing their eyes on her red shoes. It was only the shoes she thought of when the bishop laid his hand on her head during the holy ceremony. The organ sent forth its deep, solemn tones, and the children's sweet voices mingled with those of the choristers, but Karen still thought of nothing but her red shoes. That afternoon, the old lady was told by her friends that Karen had worn red shoes for her confirmation, and she told Karen that she was annoyed, that red shoes were quite unsuitable, and that from now on, whenever she went to church, she would have to wear black shoes, even if they were old. Next Sunday, when dressing for church, Karen looked first at the red shoes, and then at the black ones, and then the red ones again, and put them on. It was beautifully sunshiny weather, and Karen and the old lady had walked through the cornfields. The path was rather dusty. At the church door stood an old soldier. He was leaning on crutches, and he had a wonderfully long beard, which was not quite white, but of a reddish hue. He bowed almost to the ground and asked the old lady if she might wipe the dust off her shoes. And Karen also put her little foot forward. Oh, what a pretty dancing shoes, said the soldier. But mind you do not let them slip off when you dance, as he passed his hand over them. The old lady gave the soldier a halfpenny, and when he went into the church with Karen. And again, everyone looked at her red shoes. And all the carved figures, too, bent to gaze upon them. And when Karen knelt before the altar, she could still think of nothing but the red shoes, and she forgot to join in the hymn and praise, or in the Lord's Prayer. Lord's Prayer. At last, all the people of the church came out, and the old lady got into her carriage. Karen was just lifting her foot to follow her, and the old soldier, standing in the porch, exclaimed, "Look what pretty dancing shoes!" And Karen could not help it. She had to make a few dancing steps. And once she had begun, her legs seemed to be dancing of their own accord, just as if the shoes had received power over them. She danced around the church, and she could not stop. The coachman had to run after her. He took hold of her and lifted her to the carriage, but her feet still continued to dance, and so she kicked the old lady most cruelly. At last, only the red shoes were taken off her feet that she seemed to find peace and rest. Come in, guilty. When they arrived home, the strange shoes were put away in a cupboard, but Karen could not help going to look at them every now and then. The old lady lay ill in bed. The doctor said she could not live much longer. She certainly needed careful nursing, and who should be her nurse and constant attendant
Karen. But there was to be a grand ball in town, and Karen was invited. But she looked at the old lady who was almost dying. She looked at the red shoes, and in the end, she put them on. She thought there could be no harm in that. So she went to the ball and began to dance. But when she wanted to move to the right, the shoes bore her left. When she was going to dance up to the room, she danced down the stairs, through the streets, and the gates of town. Dance she did, and dance she must, straight through and into the dark wood. Something shone through the trees, and she thought it was the moon, but it was the old soldier with the red beard. He sat there nodding at her and repeating, "Such pretty dancing shoes." Karen got frightened and tried to pull off her shoes, but could not unclasp them. She tore off her stockings, but still the shoes stuck. They seemed to have burned to her feet. So she danced over field and meadow, in rain and sunshine, by night and day. By night was most horrible. She danced into the lonely churchyard, but the dead there did not dance. They were at rest. She wanted to sit down on the poor man's tomb where the bitter tansy grew, but for her there was neither rest nor respite. She was dancing towards the open church. She saw an angel clad in long white robes with wings that reached from his shoulders to the ground. His face was grave and stern, and in his hand he held a broad, glittering sword. "You shall dance," he said. "Dance in your red shoes until you are pale and cold, and you shrink like a skeleton. You shall dance from door to door, and wherever proud, vain children live, you shall knock so that they may hear you and be afraid." "Have mercy," cried Karen. But she did not hear the angel's answer, for the shoes carried her to the fields along the highways and byways. One morning she danced past a door she knew well. She heard psalms singing from within, and presently a coffin was borne out, covered with flowers. Then Karen knew that the good old lady was dead, and she felt forsaken by all mankind and accursed by the angel of God. Dance on she did, because dance she had to, even through the dark night. The shoes bore her over thorns and briars, till her limbs were torn and bleeding. Away she danced over the heath and to the little solitary house. She knew that the hangman dwelt there, and she tapped on the window panes with her fingers and shouted, "Come out, come out! I cannot come in to you. I am dancing." The hangman replied, "Don't you know who I am? I cut off the heads of wicked men, and my axe is sharp and keen." "Do not cut off my head," cried Karen, "for I want to live and atone for my sins. Cut off my feet with the red shoes." And then she confessed to him all her sins, and the hangman cut off her feet with the red shoes on them. But even after this, the shoes danced away with those little feet over the fields and into the deep forest. But the hangman made some wooden feet for Karen and cut some boughs to serve as her crutches, and she went her way over the heath. "Now I've suffered enough through the red shoes," thought Karen. "I will go to church and let people see me once more." But as she approached the church porch, the red shoes danced in front of her, and she was frightened and turned back. All that week she endured the keenest anguish and shed many bitter tears. But when Sunday came, she thought she had now suffered enough, and she would be just as good as the others who hold their heads high in church. And she went to the church again. But as she approached it, the red shoes danced in front of her, and in great terror she turned back and repented more deeply than ever of her sin. Then she went to the parson's home and begged that some employment might be given to her. She worked diligently and did not wish for any wages. She wanted a roof over her head and to live with good people. And the parson's wife had pity on her and took her into service. And Karen was grateful and hard-working. Every evening she sat silently listening to the parson while he read the Holy Scriptures aloud. The children loved Karen, Once she heard them talk about dress and finery, and about being as beautiful as a queen, she would sadly shake her head. When Sunday came, all the parson's household went to church, and they asked her if she would not go too. But she sighed and looked upon her crutches with tears in her eyes. And she went into her own little chamber, just large enough to contain a bed and a chair, and sat down by the open window. The wind wafted the sound of the organ into the room, and she lifted up her face to heaven and prayed, God help me. Then, in the bright sunlight, God's angel stood before her, the same one who had told her that night of horror at the church porch. But his hand did not hold a sharp-edged sword. Instead, he carried a tender green bough full of roses. With it, he touched the ceiling, and immediately lifted to a great height, and the bright stars sparkled in the spot where the bough had touched it. And he touched the walls, whereupon the room widened, and Karen saw the organ, and the old monuments of the congregation their Sunday best sitting at their pews singing. The church itself had come to the poor girl in her small chamber. She was sitting with the rest of the congregation, and they nodded to her and said, You did right to come. This is mercy, she said. And the organ played, and the children's voices in the choir mingled sweetly with it. The bright sunbeams streamed warmly through the windows upon Karen's pew. Her heart was so full of sunshine, of peace and happiness, that it broke, and her soul flew upon a sunbeam to her Father in heaven, where not a word was breathed of the red shoes. And that one was a little morbid. But you know, those moral lessons that Hans Andersen likes to put in things. Welcome in, Pep. Let's see, we've got half an hour left. I should be able to get at least one more story in. Hans Andersen stories are a lot longer than other ones. So our next story for tonight, the Snowman. All my bones are cracking and creaking. It is so wonderfully cold, said the Snowman, and the icy wind gives one a lot of courage and energy. But there's that burning thing above me in the sky. It is looking down on me a little too much. When he spoke of the burning thing, the Snowman meant the sun, and he considered it to be his worst enemy. But I shall not succeed in making me bat an eyelid, he said. His eyes were two triangular pieces of red brick, and a broken old garden rake formed his mouth and gave him some teeth, too. He was the most stately Snowman, and he was well aware of it. When he was born, children had rejoiced that the bells of the sleds had been ringing. The sun set and the moon rose, round and large, clear and cool in the dark blue night. There it is again, that burning thing, but this time it is the other way around, said the Snowman, who could not know any better, for he was only 1 day old. It does not pierce me any more with burning glances, and I don't mind it hanging up there and shining brightly so that I can see myself. If only I could move, it would be wonderful. I would glide down this icy sled track that I've seen the children go, but I cannot walk. Go away, barked the watchdog. He was a bit hoarse. That was because of the cold weather, to which he was not accustomed, as in former times he had been kept in a warm room. Sun will kill you. I saw it happen last winter with your predecessor, and before that, his predecessor. They've all gone. I don't understand you, said the Snowman. That burning thing up there ran meekly away when I looked firmly at it, and now it has come again most mildly from the other side. You don't seem to know anything, said the watchdog. They put you together only today, and botched up job they made of you. What you see above there is a moon. The sun will come again tomorrow, and it will teach you how to walk. There is a change in the weather coming soon. I can feel it in my left hind leg. It will soon be gone. Seventh streak. I quite don't know what you mean, thought the snowman, but I have the feeling that it is something unpleasant. All I know is that the burning thing that he calls the sun is no friend of mine. Go away, scram! Barked the old dog again. He pirouetted 3 times and then crept back into his hut. There was, indeed, a change in the weather. In the morning, a thick, damp fog enveloped the whole district, followed by an icy wind. Wonderfully sharp frost was in the air. What a marvelous sight presented itself when the sun rose. Trees and bushes glittered silver white and looked like a forest of white coral, and all the branches seemed to be covered with white blossoms. All the small twigs and twiglets, which you could not see in the summer because they were covered with leaves, now stood out clearly and formed a most cobwebby network among the branches. The weeping birch moved in the wind and chattered softly. The splendor of the scene was indescribable. Then the sun rose, and there was a glittering and glimmering as though everything were covered with diamond dust. Large diamonds covered the ground and shone whiter than the snow, or you could suppose that there were innumerable tiny candles burning. How lovely! Exclaimed a young girl who came into the garden followed by a young man. Both stopped near the snowman and looked at the sparkling trees. It is never so beautiful in summer, said the girl, her eyes shone. Have you never seen a fellow like this one? Said the young man, pointing at the snowman. They laughed and nodded to him merrily. Then they took each other's hands and danced on the snow-covered ground, and every step creaked and clattered. Who are those 2? Asked the snowman to the watchdog. You have been here longer than I. Do you know them? I do, said the watchdog. She stroked me and gave me a bone, and I'm going to bite her. But who are they? They're lovers, the watchdog. They're going to move into a house together and gnaw on the same bone. But you go away. Scram! Do those 2 have as much importance as you and I have? Asked the snowman. They belong to employers, said the watchdog. Really, you do not know remarkably little. Even fallen for the fact that you were born only yesterday, I am old and experienced, and I know everybody here at the house. And there is one time when I was not chained and did not have to stand in the cold. Go away, scram! Oh, the cold is wonderful, said the snowman. Now come, tell me things. You must not rattle your chain. That makes me nervous. Go away, scram! Barked the watchdog. When I was a young dog, I was very small and droll, so they say. I was a darling of all the people in the house there. I used to lie in a soft, easy chair, and the children petted my paws and my snout, and they tied embroidered handkerchiefs around my legs, and called me Doggy. When I got too big for their liking, they gave me to the housekeeper, and I lived in the basement. Now I look down into it from here when you're standing. You can see the room where I was in my master. Yes, that was where the flat keepers. You can look down into it from where you are standing. You can see the room where I was a master. Yes, that is where was the housekeeper's flat. It was much cozier than there and upstairs. Then there were no children to drag me around, and my food was even better than before. There was a cushion for my private use, and there was a warm stove. And at this time of the year, a stove was the best thing in the world. I practically crept into it. I still dream of it sometimes. You go away, scram! Stove? What does it look like? Does it look somewhat like me? Asked the snowman. What an idea! A stove is the exact opposite of a snowman. Anybody can see that. It is as black as a raven and has a long neck with a brass ring. It feeds on firewood, and you can see the flames dance inside it. You keep as close as possible to it, and that is the greatest comfort you have, said the watchdog. You must be able to see it through the window from where you're standing. The snowman looked into the basement through the window and saw the stove in the corner, shining and polished with a long, slim neck and a brass ring, and a fire burning inside. The snowman felt very peculiar. He had a feeling that he did not recognize, but that all humans recognize because they're not snowmen. How could you leave her? Said the snowman, who thought that the stove was a woman. How could you leave a place like that? The watchdog cleared his throat. They had thrown him out of the room and put him on chain, he explained, because he had bitten the leg of the master's youngest son. The boy took my bone from me. I thought bones were bones, so I was annoyed I lost my voice over it. But you go away. Scram! But the snowman had stopped listening. He kept looking into the basement room. There was a stove, big and round, like the snowman himself. There's a peculiar crackling in my inside, said the snowman. If only I could get indoors near the stove. Now that is a very modest wish. Why shouldn't it come true? I want to get in there and want to lean against it. You'll never get in there, said the watchdog. And if you did go near the stove, you would die. Go away, scram! All day long, the snowman looked in the window. At dusk, the room became cozier still. A mild glow came from the stove, and mild as only a stove can glow when it has something to eat in its mouth. The sun and moon looked quite pale compared to it. Whenever they opened the door, flames shot out their tongues. They seemed to be in the habit of doing that. A red reflection appeared on the snowman's white face and on his chest. I can hardly bear it, he said. She looks so beautiful when she puts her tongue out at me. The night was long, but the snowman did not notice it. He was deep in his own beautiful thoughts, which first crackled. In the morning, the window panes are frozen up. They were adorned with the most beautiful ice flowers that the snowman could see in his dreams, but they concealed the stove from him. The ice flowers did not melt all day, so he could not see what he thought was a lovely female being. Round about him there's a crackling and rattling, most wonderful frosty weather for a snowman. He, however, suffered from stove sickness. That is a dangerous illness for a snowman, said the watchdog. I had it myself, but got over it. You go away, scram. By the way, a thaw is coming. And a thaw came. The snowman lost weight. He did not say a word about it, and he did not complain. One morning he had collapsed. Just a tiny heap of snow was left from its protruded stick that had been his prop and his soul. Now I can understand why the stove sickness, said the watchdog. The snowman had a poker in his body. That was the cause of it. Well, now it's all over. Go away, scram! Soon all winter was gone. Go away, scram! Barked the watchdog. But the little girls who lived in the house sang. Woodruff Green, come out, come out. I will put on your woolen gloves. Cuckoo and lark, sing your joyful songs. Spring and February, that's what will be. I sing with you, cuckoo diddle dee. Shine, beautiful sun, warm as never before. Nobody ever thought of the snowman who had been standing outside of the meadow during the winter. Boy, I sound like an old goat when I bark like this. Anyway, 23 minutes. Yeah, we can do another. So our next story for the night. The false color. There was once a fine gentleman whose household consisted of nothing but a bootjack and a comb. But he possessed the most charming false collar in the world, and it is the history of this collar that we are about to hear. Well, upon my soul, said the false collar, never have I seen anything so slender and delicate, so pretty and soft. May I take the liberty of asking your name?
I'm not going to tell you, said the garter.
Where do you live? Inquired the caller. But the garter was modest and shy, and seemed to think that even this was too impertinent a question.
You seem to be an ornament, said the caller. An ornament to be worn under the dress. I see you are as useful as you are beautiful, little lady. You should not speak to me like that, returned the garter. I do not think I have given you any encouragement. But, says the caller, a beauty like yours should encourage one to anything. But you are not to come near me, said the garter. You look as though you were a man. Yes, I am a fine gentleman, retorted the false caller proudly. I have a boot jack and a comb all to myself.
But this was not true, Wolf supposed. Fir Tree and the comb belonged to his master, not to him.
Don't you come so near me, I tell you, said the garter. I'm not used to such familiarities.
So you are a prude, said the discomfited caller, and then they were taken out of the wash tub. He was starched and then hung across the chair in the sunshine, and at last laid upon the ironing board. Now the hot iron approached him.
Lady, said the false caller to the iron, dear little widow, I am getting so hot. I am becoming quite a different creature. Wrinkles are all taken out of me. Will you burn a hole in me? Ah, oh, dear little widow, may I pay my respects to you?
Nonsense, said the iron, and paused haughtily with the caller. She imagined herself to be a steam engine, that one day or other she would put up a railway to draw carriages. The false caller was a little afraid of the engines, so a pair of scissors was brought to clip off the loose ends.
Oh, said the false caller, you surely must be a ballet dancer. The way you can throw your feet about. Never have I seen anything so charming. No human being can do it. I know that, said the scissors. You deserve to be a countess, said the false caller. I myself have only got a boot jack and a comb, but if I had an earldom. Are you corking? Said the scissors, and got very indignant. And then she cut into him, and that was his third dismissal. I can try and propose to the comb, said the false caller. It is delightful to see how long you keep your teeth, young lady. Have you ever thought of getting engaged? Why, yes, said the comb. You should have known that I'm engaged to the boot jack. Engaged to the boot jack, repeated the false caller in consternation. There was now no one left to whom he could pay his addresses, and so he began to despise marriage altogether. A long time passed. At last the caller found himself in a box at the paper mill. There was a large collection of rags and tatters, the fine and coarse neatly separated, just as they ought to be. Every one of them had a great deal to tell, and most of all the false caller, for he was a great bragger. I have had a great number of sweethearts, he said. They would not give me any peace. That was because I was such a fine gentleman, beautifully starched. I had a boot jack and a comb, neither of which I ever used. You should have known me then. I looked a fine fellow. Never shall I forget my first love. She was an ornamental ribbon, delicate, soft, and pretty. For my sake, she threw herself into a tub of water. Then there was an old widow lady who grew red with passion, but I did not care for her, and let her get black with annoyance. There was a ballet dancer, too. She gave me a cut you can see here. That's how furious she would become. Even my own comb was in love with me, and she lost all her teeth in despair. Indeed, I've had many experiences of that kind, but I grieve most for the garter. I mean, the ornamental ribbon who threw herself into the tub of water. I have a great deal on my conscience. It would do me good to become white paper. And indeed, like all the other rags, the collar was turned into white paper. He was made into every he was made into the very sheet upon which the story is printed. This was the punishment for his abominable boasting.
And we should remember this and not do likewise. For how do we know what we shall not end up on a box ourselves and be made into white paper on which our whole story is printed and our misdeeds made known everywhere, just in the case of the false color? Okay, yeah. I'm definitely not going to be able to do this next story because the next story in this book is The Snow Queen, which has nothing to do with Frozen. But yeah, I won't get into the Disney issues. Disney has some issues. But anyway, let's see who is available for a raid. Oh. Sometimes I'm not sure if it's my chair this week or my back. Let's see, who is on? Oh, I see a couple of people doing a big walk. Magic Ball is still reading The Witcher. What is he reading now? Tower of Swallows. Okay. Magic Ball looks like the only one he's reading. No, no. Mysterious is reading 100 Years of Solitude. What's Briny reading? Briny is reading Pride and Prejudice. So, you don't have a preference. What else would someone called Care and Stop? People change their names on this track. Let's go Gray Dusk. Okay. I tapped the same one twice. And if anyone else who likes having stories narrated to them, if you notice the drop right now is getting 2 months of Audible for getting a sub or giving me a gift sub. I don't know how long that's going, but it's a cool idea. Of course, I'm not on Audible yet. I have not gotten an application passed. I'm on it, but I haven't gotten that story to read for it yet, so someday maybe you might hear me on Audible. But for now, we are going to raid Dusk. And a reminder, I might stream Monday. I'm not sure, but then I'll be gone for a week. And I might be back in time for Fairy Tales Friday after. Again, depends on, life. So, I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Feel free to join the raid. And have a good weekend.